Hi, my name is Andrew Wedgbury. I'm a PhD candidate studying some of the more sociological aspects of angling with the University of Worcester. However, my background is in social media. I have a master's degree in social media and I've worked professionally in the fields of social media and angling. Like many people, I've been concerned by the recent apparent downturn in angling, and I'm here today to speak to you about some of the ways that social media may be able to help this situation. So what exactly am I going to speak about today? Well, first, I'd like to discuss the current situation as I see it. And then I'd like to speak about the way that angling can rise using social media. And finally, I'd like to speak about what I see as the next challenge for angling. It turns out that apart from being a city where I study, Worcester's quite a useful model for my talk today. Worcester's a beautiful and vibrant city, and if anyone's ever been there, you'll know it's also a very busy city. Worcester has a population of something like 103,000 people. Now, if recent news reports are to be believed, in the year 2017 to 2018, angling lost something like 132,000 anglers from amongst its ranks. That is more than the entire population of Worcester. Now, if Worcester was to empty within the space of 1 year, I'm pretty sure that would make the news. But I'm yet to hear anything on the news at 10 about the masses of anglers who seem to be giving up on angling. Now, of course, there's a lot of reasons why these figures could be wrong. There's a new annual rod licence, free children's rod licences, changes to carp fishing licences, and there's problems with GDPR also. So let's just forget for a moment these potentially erroneous figures and have a look at more accurate historical figures. According to official government figures, between the periods of 2010 and 2016, angling lost something like 181,000 anglers. Just to put that into context, that's the equivalent of all of Worcester and my hometown of Redditch, which was once itself famous for the manufacture of fishing tackle. Now, if Redditch and Worcester was to empty, even inside of 6 years, I'm pretty sure that would make the news. And yet I'm yet to hear anything about the masses of anglers that seem to be giving up on the activity of angling. Nothing I'm saying here today is intended as a criticism for the Angling Trust or their partners such as the Canal and Rivers Trust and the Angling Trades Association, amongst many others, who are doing valuable work to attract people to angling. Along with an army of skilled volunteers, they spend their time at the grassroots of our sport, teaching people how to fish, and they're doing a great job, but we need to take a closer look. Of course, organisations like the Angling Trust do a lot to promote the sport of angling, and according to the Angling Trust, they've managed to introduce something like 77,000 people to the sport of angling over the last 3 years. That includes something like 47,000 adults and 30,000 juniors, and that's a fantastic work done by dedicated volunteers and staff at these organisations in order to promote angling at its grassroots. But wait, let's be really optimistic for a moment and say that 50% of those 77,000 anglers will go fishing again. That's knocked our figures down to 38,500 people. And let's be even more optimistic and say that 50% of those people will become lifelong licence-paying anglers. That's knocked our figures down to only 19,250 people. So let's look at the figures even closer. The 181,000 people that we lost over a period of 6 years averages to just over 30,000 a year. The average anglers introduced over a period of 3 years averages out to just over 25,500. Even if we were to have an unachievable 100% success rate, we would still be losing 4,499 anglers every year from the sport of angling. But more realistic, but I still think optimistic success rate that I've predicted shows that we would be losing around about 23,750 anglers every year. If angling wants to live, it has to rise. Now let me explain to you what I mean by rise. As a social media expert, I've spent more than my fair amount of time in marketing seminars, and I know the value of a good acronym. So I'm going to explain to you exactly what the acronym RISE stands for. Working in social media and working in the social media of angling, I often hear that we need to reach more children. We need to reach more lapsed anglers. And although I agree wholeheartedly with both of these notions, as a parent, I know that children don't like playing outside as much as they used to. I also can understand parents who are concerned about their children who have an activity which keeps them by open water. As a realist, I know that we must reach out to more lapsed anglers, but equally, I know that many of those lapsed anglers are sadly no longer with us. So what are we going to do to get more people into angling? We're going to reach out and we're going to start looking at new audiences. Some of you may know this gentleman. This is Daniel Gallardo, and I hope I pronounced his name correctly. Daniel is responsible for introducing tenkara to America. Now, tenkara has proven popular amongst ramblers and hikers, and I think that's where Daniel's success lies. Daniel didn't introduce tenkara as a great way for anglers to go fishing. He introduced tenkara as a great way for everybody to interact with the environment. As Daniel says, hikers, for example, understand that they love the environment, but we can teach them that they love the waterways too. And if we can do that, then we can hope for a better future for our waterways and fisheries. So who can we hope to attract here in the UK? Well, John Ellis of the Canal and Rivers Trust tells me that 8.1 million people live within a kilometre of a waterway. And over half of us, something like 52% of people in the UK, live within 5 miles of a canal or waterway. These are potential new anglers, but also this audience is far too general, so let's focus even closer. The Ramblers tell us that something like 9.1 million people go walking for at least 30 minutes every 4 weeks. Imagine if we could just attract 10% of those people to also include angling in their activity. That would be 900,000 new anglers, and that would change the face of angling alone. But we struggle to attract these people, not because angling is not an enjoyable activity, but because we insist on speaking our own language. We need to stop thinking that all activities speak the same language as angling. Only by adjusting our message can we hope to reach wider audiences. This brings me on to our next point. We need to learn as a community to interpret and share our passion. And how are we going to do that? Well, rather predictably, I'm going to suggest social media. More than that, I'm going to speak specifically about Facebook. Why? Because no matter how many troubles they've had recently, Facebook still dominates the social media market. And it's still prevalent in homes and thoughts of most people within the demographic that angling might appeal to. Half of the population, over 30 million people, have an active Facebook account. If we could reach just 1% of those people and tell them about the good work that angling does in the world, that would be 300,000 people that know all about the activity of angling. And if we could encourage just 12% of that 1% to give angling a go, that would be 36,000 new anglers. That could reverse the current trend in angling alone. So I guess that's it. I've solved angling. Every organisation out there should now transfer their marketing budget into my bank account and let me know at my private address in the Seychelles how well it went. But wait a minute, if it was that easy, wouldn't we all be doing it already? Well, we're all trying to do it, but it's not necessarily working. And I think I found out why. When I was a humble undergraduate, just having been made redundant from the construction industry and starting out again in the world of academia, I got given possibly the worst piece of advice that I've ever been given by a highly respected lecturer who I still respect and keep in contact with. He said to me, when giving my first presentation, just to use your own words. The problem is, nobody understood my own words, and I think that's the problem we have in angling. We're trying to speak a language that nobody else really understands. Now clearly I can't see you, but I'm guessing that not many people would have put their hands up because you would have seen the picture first. Pictures speak volumes to us as humans. They're easier to translate than the code that we call writing. So our minds, if a picture is available, tends to gravitate towards the image. And this is relevant because social media is a very image-orientated world. We will tend to gravitate more to the pictures of the pretty fish or the lovely cute cat than we would to a long sentence telling us all about the very important subject matter that we should really be paying attention to. And I want to illustrate this point by showing you a very short video of me actually catching that fish. And in this video, I think I'm speaking fluent angling, but let's see what you think. I know what you're thinking. I never actually said anything. But the point is, I didn't need to say anything to be speaking fluent angling. In fact, I don't think I even needed to be in that image. The fact is that what speaks angling to anglers is the environment, the green trees, the flowing water, the countryside. This is the social media language of angling. When I began to realise this, I started wondering how I could learn the language of other activities and use that language to speak about angling. I tried many different techniques. I tried neural networks, I tried manually coding every single image, and then I realised that Facebook had been doing it for me for a long time. Facebook automatically apply alternative text to images and objects in order to help the blind and visually impaired. In effect, Facebook are turning visual images into readable language. In effect, I can use this information gained by analysing user-generated groups to understand their basic visual language. I can then use that knowledge to compare that visual language with the pages generated by organisations and businesses to find out if those organisations and businesses are speaking the same basic visual language as the groups that they are targeting. More than this, armed with this knowledge, I can find ways of adjusting the message to reach new groups. For the first time, we have a way of understanding and translating our activity into an activity that is relevant and interesting to new groups of people. As an example of this, we have here a graph of the visual language used by a popular user-generated angling group on Facebook. We have along the bottom a list of the tags attributed to images by Facebook in that group, along with the frequency of their use. If we organise that graph from least used to most used, and compare the graph with the results from a page generated by a business or organisation, we can see how well that business or organisation are speaking the language of their target audience. Here, for example, we have an angling organisation trying to speak to that angling group that we spoke about earlier. Here we can see on the right that the organisation is speaking generally the right language, but over on the left we can see a massive disconnect in that some of the visual imagery is unlikely to appeal to that group. This is an example of an organisation not speaking the language of the group that they are trying to reach. Of course, if my theory was to have any validity, then I would need to demonstrate this with other groups. So I returned to Tenkara, and my theory was that Tenkara was reaching the groups that they were targeting more efficiently than the angling organisation that I spoke about earlier on. To prove this, I found a user-generated Tenkara group and compared this to Tenkara USA, which is the business that Daniel Gallardo set up when he introduced Tenkara to the United States of America. And I found what I had expected. There are a few disconnects which are to be expected, as Tenkara USA don't have access to this technique. However, on the whole, Tenkara are speaking exactly the language of the groups that they are trying to reach. This makes their message more effective than an organisation or using a different visual language than the groups they are trying to reach online. This became even more interesting when I compared Tenkara USA to a user-generated hiking group. As you can see, there's a small disconnect, but Tenkara USA, on the whole, are speaking the language of hikers. No wonder hikers are taking up Tenkara. They're speaking the same language, and so they can understand each other. And in the interest of fairness, I compared the angling organisation that we spoke about earlier on with the same hiking group. We can see here that the angling organisation seems to be speaking roughly the same language as the hikers. However, there's quite a large disconnect here on the left, and I believe that these peaks here on the right are far too spread out to be speaking the same language. However, because the two groups are speaking a similar language, does this represent an opportunity for angling in the UK? Although this new methodology is in its infancy and needs much more proving, it represents a step forward in the way that we are striving to understand the groups that we are reaching out to. Let's use this methodology in order to tackle some of the challenges that angling is currently facing. So now that we've decided that we need to reach out to new groups, and we've learned that we need to interpret and share our passion with these new groups, and we've even learned that we can start to understand their visual language and speak the same visual language as new groups, does this mean that outdoor recreationalists are all going to take up angling as part of their outdoor activities? Well, I don't think so, and this is probably the reason why. Let's face it, angling isn't the most portable of activities. Certainly, course angling requires too much equipment for your average hiker to be able to carry it easily whilst enjoying a hike in the countryside. This demonstrates, I think, the next challenge for angling. If we're going to get more people fishing, then we need to make it easier for more people to fish. And angling suffers quite often from a certain level of snobbery when it comes to what we do. Now, I've referenced tenkara quite often throughout this talk, and those of you that are more observant will have noticed that my fish caught earlier on in the short video was caught without the use of a reel. Now, I use a method called kiru. To illustrate the difference, tenkara can be seen as a kind of wet fly fishing technique, whereas kiru is much more like check nymphing. Although in Japan, where kiru is far more popular than tenkara, and quite often in my own fishing, kiru can be a bait fishing technique. I often use worms to catch trout in small streams. And when I tell people about my fishing, I get the usual fishing for trout with bait is cheating, or I'll get what is the matter with good old-fashioned fly fishing. Here is a picture of Charles Cotton using a technique which is indistinguishable from tenkara more than 200 years before tenkara was ever recorded in Japan. The simple answer is that tenkara is good old-fashioned fly fishing. Now, I'm not about to suggest that tenkara or even kiru is the answer to the future of fishing, but it is a challenge to anglers to remove some of their snobbery about the right and the wrong ways to catch fish in order to enable more people to enjoy the sport that we all know and love. So you'll find more information about my plans for Rise on my blog associated with this presentation. And so I'll end this recorded presentation in the same way that I ended the live presentation, and that is with a plea to all anglers. If angling wants to live, we need to rise. And as anglers, we need to rise to the challenge. We need to increase our reach, and we need to interpret and share our passion. And then we need to enable others to take part in the sport that we love.